And we shouldn't get tripped up when other faith traditions talk about the law and talk about things that we should or shouldn't do, because God says he's imprinted his law on each of our hearts. But the thing that we want to emphasize is that God didn't call the United States of America to be a theocracy. He didn't call the United States of America out of nothing and say, this is my nation. He did that to ancient Israel. And so no other nation on the planet has been called in such a fashion the way the nation of Israel has been called by God. God has called the nation of Israel, and then he has called his church. And the nation of Israel matured into the church. God has called this believing remnant, the church, to this distinction. So the nation that God has his eye on is not the nation of Israel, but it is the nation of the church, made of people from every tribe and tongue and nation. And they simultaneously live as servants of God and servants of their respective nations. And I mentioned that when I started the post, when I said that a Christian right now could be living under a dictatorship that allows human slavery. And so God says, yeah, we're not caught off guard by that. I recognize that, but I use that for my glory. And so I just want to emphasize again, theocratic Israel is not comparable to the United States. They are completely different entities, and they do not intersect at all. And if you believe that they do, unfortunately, you're believing the wrong thing. And I'd certainly be happy to have a discussion with you and show you clearly why the United States and covenant Israel are not two of the same, or two of the same things in different eras of time, nor do they have any connection to each other. And we can look at that from the scripture. The theocratic Israel is the church in the church's infancy before Jesus came. So the Jubilee, as we saw in the text of scripture, is a celebration commanded by God to be conducted after the culmination of 7 Sabbath cycles of 7 years, and a total of 49 years that we read in the text. The next year is the 50th year. The next year, Day of Atonement, blow the horn. And the activities that lead to the Jubilee, as they pertain to servitude, are that debt collectors aren't allowed to collect debt from their fellow Jews every 7th year. And at the end of the 7th cycle, the Jubilee begins. And all property that was removed from those people who were in debt, all that property now goes back to that person's family. So it could go back to that person if they're still alive, but if they're not alive, it goes back to their posterity. It goes back to their family. And so that property goes back that was taken out of all of those Jewish families because of the debt and servitudes. But that text of scripture, and we have the money shot on this, it's only for the Jews. So the Jubilee was a celebration that God authorized, ordained as a ceremonial celebration, but it was only for Jews. It was only for covenant Jews. It wasn't for the other people. It wasn't for the sojourners. It wasn't for the people that they took into slavery from the nations around. It was only for the Jews. Also, we have to recognize that the Jubilee celebration was a ritual, and just a reemphasis of what I just said, the Jubilee celebration was a ritual and ceremony in which the Jews participated. That's the key. It was a ceremony that the Jews participated in, and it was and God used it to tell the Jews something about himself. And more important, it was to tell them about Jesus, the Messiah. And we'll start seeing that in a few places. And like I said, that's the key. The Jubilee was a ceremonial aspect of the whole Mosaic law and the whole Mosaic system. And it wasn't a historic celebration that is supposed to lead to a concrete and specific and ongoing practice in the church. That's why we don't talk about the Jubilee now. Now, African Americans will talk about the emancipation of the Juneteenth proclamation, and they'll say, oh, the Jubilee. If they want to say that, that's fine. But that doesn't comport with what the scripture says the Jubilee was about. The Jubilee was not about a secular nation making a determination that they were no longer going to have slavery or no longer permit the holding of slaves. That's not what the Jubilee text was about. So you can say, oh, this is our Jubilee. But if you want to tie that to the Bible, the two don't match. And we got to put our eyes and brains on this, because well-meaning African-American pastors and well-meaning African-American people and well-meaning African-American provocateurs of all things black and black power and black success and black wealth and black well-being, they want to tie Jubilee to some of these historic moments. But the biblical Jubilee is not that. And so we can't let people take words that are identical to historic words that were used in certain spiritual and religious contexts and take that word and say, okay, now it applies over here. We simply cannot do that. We violate the scripture when we do that, and we deceive people into thinking that the aspects that God put forth in the scripture are now applicable over here too. They're simply not, and we'll see that soon. So like I said, the Jubilee was a ceremonial aspect of the law. It wasn't a historic celebration. It was concretely supposed to be carried on by the church. And again, you don't see it in the church in the New Testament scriptures. You absolutely don't see it in the church in reality now, except the place that I told you. And here are some evidences for this. One, we know that the ceremonial aspects of the law were done away with. And we know this from the passage that we cited, and we talked about it in our last offering. We said the handwriting of requirements that was against us was nailed to the cross.